Hey, so today I listened from Deuteronomy 12 to literally the first chapter of 2nd Samuel. So, the Israelites finally make it to the promised land. They divide up all the spoils, which takes a little bit. Joshua dies. Then we get to the story of Ruth. And that's significant because Ruth's great-grandson or great-great-grandson is David. But after Ruth, we meet Samuel. And before I get to that, in Judges 12, Judges 10, up to that point, the Lord had constantly gotten the Israelites out of danger, out of bondage, as he promised he would, as long as they kept the commandments and didn't. The Lord's number one thing is, I don't want you to turn into these people. I don't want you to worship their gods. I don't want you to mix with them. I don't want you to do any of that. If you do that, I will not save you. And guess what? They do that. And not only do they do that, but they want a king. And this is going back to the prophet Samuel now. The Lord talks to Samuel and he's like, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me, that I should rule over them. And Saul is chosen. Now, at the beginning, Saul is a really, 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 really good candidate for the king of Israel. But Saul has a couple of issues. First off, he's timid. I mean, when it comes to David and Goliath, but we'll get there in a second. Saul decides that because Samuel hasn't come yet, Samuel's supposed to come to him so they can offer burnt offerings, and Saul decides, I'm going to do it anyway without Samuel. And so Samuel chastises him. He's like, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to wait for me, kind of a thing. And then the thing that gets Saul really is they go in and attack these people. They destroy everything. They're told, Saul is told by the Lord to destroy everything. Get rid of all of it. And he decides instead he's going to get rid of most of it, but keep the best of the flocks for a sacrifice. Now, you look at that and you think, well, he's saving it for a sacrifice. Like, how is that a bad thing? It's a bad thing because the Lord would rather obedience than sacrifice. I don't know if they still do scripture mastery, but that verse is scripture mastery. That the Lord would rather have obedience than sacrifice. That's one thing that Saul didn't apparently understand. That God just wanted him to listen. And so Saul loses the kingdom. Saul is no longer anointed to be king. David is, and Saul is pissed. Only because after the David and Goliath thing, which we could talk about that, how David prepared he picked up 5 stones. So, if the first stone didn't work, he had a backup and a backup and a backup and a backup. And the lesson we learn from that is that, a lot of times we try to plan life very linearly, very just on a line, just very this and this and this and this and this and this. But what the Lord wants, I think one of the things the Lord wants us to get out of that is that you need to have a backup plan. If plan A doesn't work, which we all assume it will, we always assume that, I'll do this and that and it'll all work out and I'll be happy. Not how that works. So it's important to have a backup plan. It's important to understand that if this doesn't work, we can do this instead, and whatever happens is the Lord's will. So sorry. Right after the whole David and Goliath thing, Saul gets jealous because all the just heard a weird noise. I think it's the folks up there working on the tires. Anyway, all of the people, all the women dance and celebrate, hey, David's awesome, and Saul's pretty cool, but David's really cool. And that sent Saul on a rage campaign to try to destroy David. And so David goes off and is in hiding, and Saul is trying to go get him, and eventually David has the chance to kill Saul, but he doesn't do it. And a second time, David has a chance to kill Saul, but he doesn't do it. And right up until Saul's death, right after those two experiences, Saul finally confesses the reason he's so pissed at David is because he's more righteous than Saul, and the Lord is going to bless him in that way and give him the kingdom of Israel, and that's why Saul's so upset up until Saul's death, which happens in the beginning of 2 Samuel chapter 1, which I just listened to. So apologize for that slight interruption. My invitation for y'all tonight would be to listen to the Lord thy God. Pay attention to even the small things that you're prompted to do. Remember the story of President Monson, who, I think he was a bishop at the time, he had a member of his ward that was in the hospital that had called, or his family had called, and wanted President Monson to go and visit him. And President Monson was like, well, I've got a priesthood leadership meeting, but I'll go right after that. And President Monson decides to, right at the end of the last talk, go. And by the time he went, the member had passed away. President Monson learned after that never to ignore promptings. That's my invitation to you, is to look for those promptings and don't ignore them.